Um, Yesterday, we concluded the 43rd cycle of the learning of the Rambam. 40 years ago, on the last day of Pesach, the Rebbe launched a campaign that the Rambam should be studied in a lesson plan where it's concluded at ideally 3 chapters a day to conclude once a year. One can't do 3 chapters a day to conclude once a year. One should do 1 chapter a day, conclude once in 3 years. Similar to the custom that there is in Torah Shabbat. The general custom is to complete the entire Torah every year. So we read an entire Seder each week. In the course of a year, we complete the whole Torah. And there is a custom, which for many years was a prevalent custom in Eretz Yisrael, to read the Torah only a third of a Seder each week and complete the Torah in 3 years. So similarly with Mishnah Torah, is Torah Shabbal Peh, the halachas of Torah are compiled by the Rambam, so that the main path is to do 3 chapters a day and finish once a year. And those that can't do 3 chapters a day, 1 chapter a day and to finish once in 3 years. Then the Rebbe said that since one of the main purposes of this campaign is to promote Achdus, unity amongst the Jewish people. And the pasuk says, "Atam mitzavim hayom kulchem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem," and includes all the categories, v'feichem, shiftechem, and includes the men and the women, children. So, how do you bring about Achdus, unity of the entire Jewish people through such a program? So the question was, how should the women participate? How should the children participate? So the Rebbe said then that the Rambam is called the Meirah HaNevuchim, the guide for the perplexed. And since he's the Meirah HaNevuchim, the guide for the perplexed, so anything that we're perplexed about, we can surely find the answer in the Rambam himself. The Rambam himself. So where do we find the answer to this question? The Rebbe said it's very simple. Before the Rambam wrote the Sefer Mishnah Torah, which is his halachic work on halacha, he first wrote another sefer called Sefer HaMitzvahs, the Book of Mitzvahs. And the Sefer HaMitzvahs he wrote in Arabic, which was the language of the masses. So obviously he considered it user-friendly for everyone, not necessarily for scholars. The only book that the Rambam wrote, Lashon HaKodesh, is the Mishnah Torah. All the rest of the works of the Rambam he wrote in Judeo-Arabic. So the Mishnah Torah was written in Lashon HaKodesh, but the Sefer HaMitzvahs in Arabic, so obviously he believed that it was appropriate for the masses. And in the Sefer Mishnah, the Sefer HaMitzvahs, he goes through all the 630 mitzvahs. In fact, in short, in concise form, he goes through all the 630 mitzvahs. In fact, it's an interesting thing. Yesterday was the Siyum, today is the beginning of the new cycle. So today's Shiur, in the 3 Prakim a day, starts. Today's Shiur, you have the introduction to the Mishnah Torah. And the opening verse, every one of the Rambam Svarim, he begins with a pasuk. The Hagdama, he also begins with a pasuk. So the pasuk that he begins the Hagdama with is Oz loy eivosh v'habiti el kol mitzvoseh. Pasuk in Tehillim. The translation of the pasuk is Oz loy eivosh, then I will not be ashamed. V'habiti el kol mitzvoseh, when I have a look at all your commandments. So how is that connected with the Sefer of the Rambam? So the Rebbe once explained this in a very interesting way. So the Rambam is saying, I'm writing a Sefer. This Sefer is going to include all the halachas of the entire Torah. Big undertaking. Right? 14 volumes, composed of 83 sections, covering every single mitzvah, covering every single halacha in the Torah. In fact, the Rambam's work is the only work that covers in halacha, that covers all the halachas of the Torah. We mentioned recently, I think just for the talking time, we mentioned that the Shulchan Aruch only covers the halachas that are pertinent in time of Golus, outside of Beis Hamikdash. The Rambam covers all the halachas, both those that are pertinent in time of Beis, as well as those that are pertinent in the time of Beis Hamikdash, including the halachas that are pertinent in the time of Yisrael. All the halachas of the Torah, if it's a halacha and the ones of the Torah, it's in the Sefer Mishnah Torah of the Rambam. So the question is, how can you take on such an undertaking without being concerned that maybe you'll miss out one mitzvah, maybe you'll miss out one halach? So the Rambam says, Oz loy evosh, the habiti el kol mitzvah. I'm not ashamed, I'm not going to be ashamed, because I looked first at all your mitzvahs. In other words, before writing the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam wrote the Sefer HaMitzvahs. And in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, he goes through all the 613 mitzvahs. And in a concise form, he talks about the general principles of each one of the mitzvahs. So since he covered all the 613 mitzvahs in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, so he used the Sefer HaMitzvahs as a checklist to make sure that he doesn't miss anything out in Mishnah Torah. So that's the meaning of Oz loy eivesh, then I won't be ashamed. Because I'm looking at the Sefer HaMitzvahs. I'm looking at the Sefer HaMitzvahs contains all the 613 mitzvahs. And I'm using that as a framework on which I'm building the Mishnah Torah. So since the Sefer HaMitzvahs is an introduction to the Mishnah Torah, it includes all the 613 mitzvahs. So therefore, that would be the perfect solution to the question of how everyone can participate in this learning. And that is divide up the Sefer HaMitzvahs into lessons based on the same principles of the Mishnah Torah. In other words, each day in the Mishnah Torah, whichever mitzvahs are covered in that portion of the Mishnah Torah, take in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, the mitzvahs that are connected with those, the mitzvah that is connected with those halachos, and make that the lesson plan for the Sefer HaMitzvahs. So in that way, people that can study Sefer HaMitzvahs and be part of the same program as the learning of the Mishnah Torah. And the Rebbe very much encouraged women and children to participate in this program by doing Sefer HaMitzvahs. This was 40 years ago on Achim Shal Pesach. Now, the way that the Rambam is divided, 3 chapters a day. So it takes 11 and a half months to go through the entire night. So 11 and a half months means you have a remainder of 2 weeks each year. So 2 weeks, every year it becomes 2 weeks earlier. Then you have a leap year like this year. So it becomes 6 weeks earlier. So in the course of 40 years, we completed the Rambam 43 times. And we still have a little remainder because it's only Pezayin Adar when we finished. And the beginning of the initial learning began on the 27th of Nisan. So in the course of 40 years, we covered the Rambam 43 times. So yesterday was the conclusion of the 43rd cycle, and today is the beginning of the 44th cycle. So in the last section of the Rambam is Hilchos Melachim, the laws of kings. In some editions, it's called Hilchos Melachim u'Milchamoseihem, the laws of kings and their wars. And in some editions, it's called Hilchos Melachim u'Milchamoseihem u'Melech HaMashiach, the laws of kings and their wars and the king Mashiach. Because Hilchos Melachim has 12 chapters. The last 2 chapters speak about Mashiach. In the beginning of the 11th chapter, the Rambam says, Melech HaMashiach Osid Lamed, King Mashiach is going to rise, return the kingship of David HaMelech to its initial old status, the Mamshal HaRishena to its initial leadership. It's going to build a Beis HaMikdash. It's going to gather in the dispersed of Israel. And all the laws in his days will return, will come back to the way they were originally. The offering Karbanos again, Shemitah, Yovel, everything according to the instructions of the Torah. Then he says, anyone who doesn't believe in it, or if somebody believes in it, but he doesn't anticipate his coming, he's not waiting impatiently for Mashiach to come. Is not just rejecting all the prophets, because all the prophets are filled with prophecies about the coming of Mashiach. He's also rejecting the Torah itself and Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Because in 3 places in the Chumash, the Torah speaks about Mashiach. Where are the 3 places in Chumash the Torah speaks about Mashiach? One is in Parshas Tzav, after it talks about the Jewish people being dispersed in Galus. It says that you will return to Hashem. Hashem will gather in your captivity or your dispersion, will bring you together and bring you back and make things even better for you than it was for your forefathers. So that's a reference to the redemption. And we'll follow at the end of those. Then in the portion of Balaam, where it talks about Bilam's prophecies. So towards the end of the portion, Bilam said after Balak got fed up with Bilam, he said, I invited you to curse my enemies, instead you keep blessing them. Why don't you just go back home? So Bilam says to Balak, I'll do that, I'll go back home. But before I do that, I just want to tell you a little bit of what's going to happen at the end of time. And he tells him, Darach Koichav Yaakov, a star will shoot forth from Yaakov. There comes Shevet in his throne, the ruler will rise from Israel. He will crush Machatz Parasei Mayev, a character called Keshes. He talks about how he will rule from one end of the from sea to sea, and he talks about where the Rambam explains it. He talks about two Mashiach. He talks about David HaMelech, who will rescue the Jewish people from their enemies in his time, and the descendant of David HaMelech, the ultimate Mashiach, who will rescue the Jewish people from Golos and return the glory of the Jewish people and the glory of Torah mitzvahs to its initial and correct place. At the very end, the Rambam says, I mentioned two places. I mentioned the Parshas Tzav and the Parshas Balak. Third place is when it talks about the laws of Arei Miklat. When it talks about the laws of Arei Miklat, cities of refuge, so it says that you should set aside 3 cities of refuge in Eretz Yisrael, 3 cities of refuge in Even HaYarden, Transjordan. And when Hashem will broaden your boundaries, as He has promised you, then you should set aside another 3 cities. What is the meaning of when Hashem will broaden your boundaries as He has promised? So we know that in Parshas Lech Lecha, and the Bris Bein Absarim, by the covenant between the halves, and Hashem made a covenant with Abraham, so He promised him that his descendants will receive 10 lands, the 7 lands of Knaini, Frizi, Amedi, Yebusi, Gergashi, that we always talk about, and another 3 that he mentions first is Kaini, Nizi, and Kadmoni. These 3 lands, Kaini, Nizi, and Kadmoni, we don't find mentioned. Moshe Rabbeinu was told to tell the Jewish people, take the Jewish people out of Egypt, and bring them to the promised land. He was told to take them to the land of Naini and the Chiti and the Frizi and the Yebusi and the Gergashi, the Chivi, but he doesn't mention Kaini, Nizi, and Kadmoni. Now it says that Kaini, Nizi, and Kadmoni are Ammon, Moav, and Edom. And Moshe Rabbeinu was instructed when he took the Jewish people towards Eretz Yisrael, Al Tatzaras Moav, don't besiege Moav. Because temporarily Hashem gave the lands of Ammon, Moav, and Edom to the descendants of Lot. Lot had 2 sons, Ammon and Moav. And Yitzchak Avinu's descendant, Esau. They were given these 3 lands temporarily. But when Hashem will broaden your boundaries, as He promised, He swore to your forefathers. Hashem made a promise to Avraham Avinu that ultimately the Jewish people will receive also the 3 lands of Canaan, and that has not yet been fulfilled. So obviously that's going to be fulfilled when Mashiach comes. And the Rambam says, like Hashem doesn't give commandments for nothing. So if Hashem commanded us that when He will broaden our boundaries, we should add another 3 Arei Miklat, obviously it's a commitment that He's going to broaden our boundaries. When is He going to broaden our boundaries? Mashiach comes, in addition to the lands of the 7 nations of Canaan that we had at the time of the first base of Mikdash, we will also have an additional 3 lands of Kaini, Knizi, and Kadmoni. Over there, another 3 Arei Miklat need to be assigned. So that's a 3rd place where the Torah specifically speaks about the coming of Mashiach. Therefore, the Rambam says that one who rejects the concept of Mashiach and doesn't anticipate the coming of Mashiach, doesn't await the coming of Mashiach, is not just rejecting all the prophets, it's also rejecting the Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu, because in Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah that was given by Moshe Rabbeinu, we have 3 very strong references to the coming of Mashiach. Edom eventually, the Bnei Esau eventually settled in Europe. But the land of Edom, that is referred to in the Chumash, is closer to Eretz Yisrael. Then in the very final halacha, the Rambam says, in the time of Mashiach, there won't be any hunger, there won't be any wars, there won't be any jealousy, there won't be any competition. Why? Because there'll be an abundance of goodness. All pleasant things, all delicacies will be available like dust. So the simple meaning of available like dust means just like there's an abundance of dust in the world, no shortage of dust. So there'll be an abundance of all delicacies. But there is, and therefore there won't be any wars and hunger, because wars are caused by the fact that I'm worried that you have and I don't have. I make a war with you to take away what you have, so I should have. But if there's an abundance of delicacies, plenty for everybody, there's no cause for wars, there's no cause for jealousy, and there's no cause for strife. So in the times of Mashiach, there won't be any hunger, there won't be any war, there won't be any jealousy, there won't be any competition, because there'll be an abundance of goodness in the world. All delicacies will be available as dust. So there is a deeper meaning. Available as dust doesn't only mean that be as plentiful as dust. It also means they'll be as significant as dust. People will have greater and higher values. People will know what's really valuable. And because they'll know what's really valuable in life, so physical, material delicacies will be insignificant. Just like today, we look at dust and we know that it's insignificant. Nobody's going to make a big deal out of dust. So in the time of Mashiach, when the world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, like the waters cover the sea, so the material abundance and delicacies that are available will be there. People will use them for what they need them. They won't be significant, won't be meaningful. Like dust is not meaningful. So what will people be engaged in? The engagement of the entire world will be only to know Hashem alone. Therefore, children of Israel will be extremely wise people. They will know the concealed matter. They will comprehend the knowledge of their Creator according to the ability of man. The Nemar, as the Pasuk says, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, like the waters cover the sea. And this is the conclusion of the last Perek in the Rambam. The Rambam says, Nishlam Hilchos Malachim. This concludes the laws of kings and the entire composition. Baruch she'amar v'haya elam b'pratei v'loler b'lastis Hashem. He said, and the world became in each detail and in general. Ham v'nishlam, this concludes the entire work. Tevach v'tel b'rei elam, with praise to God, the Creator. That is the final halacha in the 43rd cycle. Then the 44th cycle, the first halacha from Simchas Torah, when we finish Zeis HaBracha, we right away take out another Sefer Torah, and we start from Parshas. In other words, we don't finish and say, oh, okay, done, have a nice day. We finish the intention to right away start again. So when we conclude the Rambam, we also begin the new cycle of Rambam. First halacha in first of the Svarim of the Rambam, which is Sefer Hamada, book of knowledge, and the first section within Sefer Hamada is Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, the laws of the foundations of the Torah. So it starts off with Yesod HaYesodos, the foundation of all foundations. V'Amud HaChachmas, and the pillar of all wisdoms, is Leida Sheyesh Sham Matzui Rishon, to know that there is a first existence. V'Hu Mamtzi Kol Nimtza, he is the one who creates, brings into being all existence. Kol HaNimtzoim, everything that exists, Mishamayim Va'aretz, from heaven to earth, and Asher B'neiim, and everything in between, Le'nimtzu Ella Me'amitas Himatzeh, that come into existence only from the truth of his existence. Which means, we say that he is the only true existence. Everything else comes from him. What's the definition of a true existence? What's the difference between an existence and a true existence? So basically, we find that all existence can be divided into two categories. What the Jewish philosophers refer to as Efshari HaMetzias and a Mechuyev HaMetzias. A possible existence and a definite existence. Possible existence means, take for example, this glass. This glass didn't have to be. Somebody put it here, so it's here. It could have been, it could not have been. So somebody, a glassmaker, created it. He could have made it, he could not have made it. He didn't make it, it wouldn't be. Made it, so it is. That's called an Efshari HaMetzias. Something which could have been, could not have been. This table could be here, it could not be here. Then there is something called a Mechuyev HaMetzias, a definite existence. Something which absolutely exists. It demands its own existence. And I'll just explain it with a little, imagine the following scenario. Have a parent and a child having a walk in the park. And the parent says to the child, you see this tree? Who created the tree? So there's Hashem. Who created the screen? Hashem. Who created the cat? Hashem. Who created the squirrel? Hashem. Now the question the child asks is, but who created Hashem? It's a valid question, no? If you're telling me that if I see a tree, I should question who created the tree. And if I see a scream, I should say who created the scream. And if I see a cat, I should say who created the cat. And if I see a squirrel, I should say who created the squirrel. So why shouldn't I ask who created Hashem? Valid question, no? So the answer to this is that we understand in our minds that there's two types of existence. There's, as I said before, possible existence and definite existence. And I'll just illustrate it with an example, which is not actually a true example, but it helps us understand. Take the concept of 2 + 2 = 4. If you ask yourself a rational question, okay, not a question of emunah, just a simple, rational, logical question. As of when did 2 and 2 start being 4? Is 2 and 2 4 something that somebody had to make 2 and 2 be 4? Or is 2 and 2 essentially 4? It's essentially the case. You take 2 of anything, put it together with 2 of anything else, you're going to have 4. There's no other way. It just has to be that way. Right? So we see in our minds that there are possible existences and there are absolute existences. 2 and 2 is 4 is something we would use as an example of an absolute existence. Now, the fact is that it's not true. 2 and 2 doesn't have to be. We discussed in this year many times that in the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKodashim, there was a phenomenon of Makim Ha'adin Einam in Amida, that you could measure from the wall of the Kodesh HaKodashim to the Arden and measure 10 amos. From the other wall to the Arden was also 10 amos. The Arden itself was 2.5 amos. And 10 plus 10 plus 2.5, you measured from one wall to the other, you got 20. So 10 and 2.5 didn't equal 22.5, it equaled 20. Why? Because Hashem decided that in that case it should be 20. Why is 2 and 2 normally 4? Because Hashem made that it should be 4. But that's when you bring emunah into the picture. But from a logical, rational perspective, 2 and 2 is 4 because it has to be 4. Because there's no other way. Right? So we understand that there are existences that are possible and there are existences that are absolute. Now the truth is that there's one absolute existence. The one absolute existence is Hashem. Why does he exist? Because he exists. Not because somebody made him. He's not a conditional existence, not a possible existence. He's an absolute existence. Maybe I can illustrate that with another example. Let's say you have a visit to Antarctica. And it's freezing over there. Freezing. And you go into a building. And you walk into the building and it's warm. It's a machai. You say, why is it warm over there? Because somebody put in a heating system in this building and spending a lot of money to fuel it and warm up the building. That's why it's warm. Then you walk out of the building and it's freezing again. Yes, who made it freezing over here? How did it get so freezing over here? Yes, it just is. You're in Antarctica. Right? So there's a reality which is possible. Somebody did something about it, therefore it became. And there are realities, relatively speaking, which just are. Now, it happens to be the reason it's freezing cold in Antarctica is because Hashem created the world in such a way that the angle of the sun to Antarctica is in such a manner that in Antarctica is freezing. And he could have made Antarctica warm as well if he wanted. The only absolute existence not dependent on anything is Hashem. And he is the source of all other existence. So that's what the Rambam means when he says, from the truth of his existence, all existence came into being. And everything that exists from heaven to earth, and everything in between, exists only from the truth of his existence. Now you'll notice that the first words of this halacha, Yesod ha-Yesodos b'Amud ha-Chachma, the foundation of all foundations and the pillar of all wisdoms. is a Rosh Tevis is an acronym. Yesod begins with a Yud. Ha Yesodes begins with a Hey. Ve'amud begins with a Vav. Ha Chachmais begins with a Hey. So you have there Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yesod Ha Yesodes ve'amud ha Chachmais is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Why does the Rambam begin his sefer with Yud Kei Vav Kei? It's a nice thing to do, but the Rambam doesn't just do nice things. Everything is exact. Why does the Rambam begin the sefer Mishnah Torah, the sefer of Halachas? Why does he start it with Yud Kei Vav Kei? So this has to do, and not only does he start the sefer with Yud Kei Vav Kei, he also concludes the sefer with the pasuk of Mala Haaretz Deya Es Hashem Kamayim Layam Echasim. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, like the waters cover the sea. The knowledge of Yud Kei Vav Kei. So he starts the sefer with Yud Kei Vav Kei, and he concludes the sefer with Yud Kei Vav Kei. Why does he do that? So we know that when there's in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, there's a lot of different opinions, right? Yossi says like this, Rabbi Yehuda says like this, the Meir says like this, Beit Shammai says like this, Beit Hillel says like this. And in a halacha sefer, you bring the halacha clear and concise. This is the halacha. You don't bring all the opinions. What's the difference? So when we have a machlokes, we have two different opinions in the Talmud. So which one is right? So the klal is Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chayim. Both are the words of the living God. It's a story, I've shared it before. About a Gittin, it says that in the Beis HaMedrash, they were learning the book of Shoftim, book of Judges. And there was specifically the story of Pilegesh Begiva. Pilegesh Begiva is a very sad chapter in the history of our people. It's a story in the time of the Judges where there was a man who had a disagreement, a strong disagreement with his concubine. And he was very upset with her. And she was not prepared to tolerate his anger. So she ran away. And he wanted to appease her. So he chased after her, eventually caught up with her. And he apologized and convinced her to come back home. And she agreed. They went back home, and on their way, they traveled through the land of Binyamin, land of Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin. And it came nighttime. They needed a place to stay overnight. So they went around looking for a place, looking for a house that would take them in overnight. And unfortunately, there was no one in the town that was willing to take them in overnight. And when it came to a point where they were quite desperate, finally found a home that was prepared to take her in, but not him. So in desperation, they took advantage of the offer. She stayed there overnight, and he slept on the park bench with her. Came in the morning, he came to collect her. He found out that during the night, they abused her, and they killed her. So he was obviously distressed, distraught. And he took her body, and he cut it up into 12 pieces. He sent it to all the 12 tribes of Israel, saying, this is what happened. What are you going to do about it? So the 12 tribes of Israel immediately sent word to the tribe of Binyamin, what's going on? So the tribe of Binyamin responded and said, this is an internal matter. It's our business. Don't interfere. Our business. We'll deal with it. The other 11 tribes said, no, this is a federal case. This is not a state. It's not a devolved issue. And the tribe of Binyamin said, no, it's a state issue. It's not a federal issue. And this became a source of great tension and eventually became a war. And there was a war, it was a civil war between the tribe of Binyamin and the rest of the Jewish people. Terrible casualties. It brought terrible tragedy upon the Jewish people. The story begins with the words, Vatizda Olav Pilaksha, that his concubine sinned against him. So they were discussing this verse in this Beis HaMedrash, and they asked, what was the sin? What did she do that upset him so much? So Rabbi Vyasar said, he found a fly. Found a fly in his soup. He was very upset with her. Why is a fly in the soup? And Rabbi Yonason says he found a hair. Two opinions. One says a fly, one says a hair. Then the Gemara says that Rabbi Yasser was going home from the Beis Hamikdash. And on the way, he met Eliyahu Hanavi. So he asked Eliyahu Hanavi, tell me, what is the Almighty doing right now? Yeah, you're Eliyahu Hanavi, you have inside information. Yeah, tell me, what is the Almighty doing right now? So he said he's studying Torah. Really, studying Torah. Which section of the Torah is he studying? He said he's studying the book of Judges, the book of Shoftim, and he's studying this portion about Pilagish Begillah. So he said, wow, that's very interesting. I have a question for you. Can you find out for me, how does the Almighty explain the pasuk Batizna Alav Pilakshin? The pasuk we were just arguing about in the Beis Hamikdash. He says, I'll tell you exactly how he explains it. He explains it that my son Abiyassar says that it was a fly. And my son Yonason says that it wasn't a hair. So he said to Eliyahu Hanavi, does the Almighty have any doubts of what happened? You know, we human beings, we can speculate and doubt and question, but the Almighty knows. I mean, how can he say? So he said, Elu va'elu divrei Elokim tayim. Both are the words of the living God. It's true that he found a fly, and that he was prepared to let that one go, because a fly could have flown in by its own. It's not necessarily 100% her fault. Then when he found the hair, he had it. So both have a dimension of truth to them. But the point that I'm trying to bring out is whenever there's a machlekes in the Gemara or in the Mishnah, it's not that one is right and one is wrong. They're both right. They're both the word of the living God. Why? Because when it comes to understanding, in the realm of understanding, there's room for understanding things from various perspectives. I can explain something one way, and I can explain something another way, and both are correct explanations, looking at it from different angles. Whereas it's explained in the Hakdama of Tanya that within divinity, the word Elokim is Lashon Rabbi, because within godliness itself, there's room for various perspectives. So from the angle of Midas HaChesed, you look at things one way. From the angle of Midas HaGvura, the measure of the attribute of severity, you look at things in another way. So Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel were both very connected with aspects of godliness. Beis Shammai is connected with Midas HaGvura, and Beis Hillel is connected with Midas HaChesed. Therefore, Beis Hillel often sees it in a more lenient approach. Beis Shammai sees it in a more strict approach. Which one is right? They're both right. That's when it comes to understanding things, or when it comes to halacha, when it comes to how am I supposed to conduct myself in practice. Here you can't say there's two ways. What does Hashem want from me now? Does he want me to light Hanukkah if the first night Hanukkah 8 candles, or the first night Hanukkah 1 candle? Does he want me to do a Beis Shammai? Does he want me to do a Beis Hillel? So when it comes to halacha, we say, Devar Havaya Zu Halacha. The word of Havaya, the word of Yud Kei Vav Kei, that is halacha. Yud Kei Vav Kei doesn't leave any room for plurality. Halacha is straight to the point. That is connected with the name Yud Kei Vav Kei rather than the name Elokim. Elokim is a name that encompasses plurality. So there's room for many opinions. Elu ba'elu divrei Elokim chayim. And when it comes to halacha, Dvar Havaya Zu Halacha. So since the Rambam wrote a sefer of halach, halach is halach. So therefore, he introduces the sefer. The opening words are Yisoid HaYisoides ve'amud ha'chachmes Rashatevis Abayim. And when you get through the entire sefer, you learn all the halachas of the Torah, you're ready for Mala Haaretz Deya Es Havaya Kamayim Legam Achasi. The world will be filled with the knowledge of Havaya like the waters cover the sea. And then you go all the way back to the beginning again, and you start on an higher level of Havaya, working your way up again. So every time you start from the beginning again and go around, it's a higher level of associating with Shem Havaya. So that's a few words shared on the subject of Siyum and beginning of the Rambam, and obviously to encourage people to. I'm sure that many people are already doing it, but encourage people to start again with a new Chayis, the Shiur of Sefer HaMitzvahs. So the first few days is going to be the Hakdama of Sefer HaMitzvahs and the rules, how the Rambam sets out, how one works out, which mitzvahs are considered, which things are considered one of the 613 mitzvahs, which aren't. And then eventually we get to the actual mitzvahs themselves. So the first 4 days are the introduction and the rules. And then starts on the 5th day. Today is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos will be the Hagdama and the Klolim, and then on this coming Sunday we'll begin Sefer HaMitzvahs from the actual mitzvahs themselves at the beginning. So to encourage people to have the privilege of being part of this study system, which we know that the word Rambam is Rosh Tevis, Rabbi's Meifsai Be'eretz Mitzrayim. Thus it says, to multiply my wonders in the land of Mitzrayim. So Rabbi's Meifsai Be'eretz Mitzrayim is Rambam. So the schus of learning Rambam brings wonders to the individual, their own life, and to Klal Yisrael. And Mitzrayim is a general term for all the exiles are called Mitzrayim, and the ultimate meifus, the ultimate wonder, the Eretz Mitzrayim, is to bring an end to the Galus, and to the Jewish people should be liberated from Galus, and the final salvation through Mashiach Tzidkenu, as we learned that the Rambam concludes with the cause of Mashiach. So may we be zeicha to see it in Lamata Me'asara Tvachim, reality of our tangible reality. We're going to go over to Tanya now, unless there are any questions. Okay, that's a very good question. The question is being asked, and we mentioned the Arei Mikla, one of the proofs in the Chumash itself of Mashiach. The question is, why will we need Arei Mikla when Mashiach comes? Very good question. So this is a question with a lot of discussion about. One of the answers is that it's possible that someone might have committed an unintentional murder during the time of Galus, and they need an atonement for it. Since their atonement is through escaping to the cities of refuge, so in order for them to be cleansed from this stain that the sin run about, we need to have cities of refuge to escape. That's one of the answers. There are various others. And it's a very good question. Okay, in Tanya, we are taking us a bit of a long time with these last three chapters. We are on chapter Nun Beis 52. I'm going to start from the top of page Ayin Gimel.
273, 274.
274?
273 and 274, yeah.
273 and 274. Thank you very much. So we're going to start from the top of page Ayin Gimel, which is 273 and 274. If you have the Bible, you will find it. And it starts, the second word on the page is Avo Hashchina Atzma. So to summarize, we're trying to understand what is the Shechina. And we were using an analogy from the human condition. Said that the human soul is an indivisible entity. It's higher than any division, it's higher than any particulars, right? You can't describe the soul as a force for hearing, or a force for seeing, or a force for thinking, or a force for feeling. The soul is life itself. It's an indivisible entity. Nevertheless, from the soul emanate various different life forces that enclose themselves in the different organs and limbs in the body. Now, it's not that the soul itself is compartmentalized and is a source for all these different energies and life forces, because the soul itself is an indivisible entity. So there are no compartments in the soul. So how does this work? So we explained that there's three levels. There is the soul itself, totally indivisible, not compartmentalized in any way. That's the essence of life. And that is everywhere the same. From head to toe, every part of the person's body is equally filled by the soul. No difference between how alive you are in your brain or how alive you are in your toe. You're alive, because the soul is present. Then there are the strengths and energies coming from the soul to every part of the body, and they are differently present in every part of the body. So in the eyes, you have the power of vision. In the ears, you have the power of hearing. In your hands, you have your power of moving things. In your feet, you have your power of running. Different organs and different limbs in the body have different energies and strengths and life manifestation of life. Where is all this coming from? It's coming from a unit within the soul, which is the source of all the individual life force and energy coming from this unit. We call this the Mishkan HaNefesh. And this is present in the brain. And in the brain, you have a very strong manifestation of life because all the strongest forms of life exist within the brain. And then from the brain is extended into all the different organs and limbs in the body, specific types of life, specific types of energy, specific types of life force. So you have the essence of the soul, which is everywhere equal. You have the individual life forces coming from the soul to every part of the body differently. And you have the source from which that emanates, which is in the brain. Similarly, same is true in the divine. Where is Hashem? Hashem is everywhere, equally everywhere. The highest world and the lowest world have Hashem's presence equally. Just like in the highest world, just like in the lowest world, Hashem's present. Just like in the highest world, Hashem is present. So in the lowest world, he's present. Just like in the lowest world, he's concealed, because the lowest world doesn't really grasp him. Similarly, in the highest worlds, he's concealed, because no matter how high the grasp capability of the highest world is, it still doesn't grasp the essence of Hashem. The essence of Hashem is far beyond anything that can be grasped in the highest realms. That is as far as the essence of Hashem is concerned. And the way Hashem's life force manifests itself in each world and in each creation, it comes through tremendous contractions and tremendous concealment, and it's enclosed, and it's concealed, and it's hidden, and it manifests itself in each world and in each creation in accordance with the unique capability and capacity of that creation. In no two worlds is it the same, no two creations are the same. Everything has the divine energy and the divine life force according to its capacity. Where's all this divine life force coming from? It's coming from the source and the unit from which life emanates. That's called the Shekhinah. So within godliness, we have the source for all giving of life, giving of energy, giving of creative force. That is the Shekhinah. And we said that in terms of spheres, that is Malchus, kingship. Just like in a king, you have the king's own personality, his understanding, his emotions, that's all within himself. Then you have his kingship as his relationship with his subjects. Similarly, within the divine, you have the essence of Hashem, which transcends any relationship with the world. And then you have the sphere of Malchus, the aspect of kingship, which is described in Kunei Zohar. Malchus is peh, it's the divine mouth. Just like in a human being, the mouth is the part of the person that relates to other people. What's going on in your thought doesn't relate to other people. Nobody knows what you're thinking. But what you speak is your beginning of your relationship with the world outside you. Similarly, the divine mouth is the sphere of Malchus. And that's where the relationship with that which is beyond him, as if it were, begins. So the source of all life and energy coming to the world is the Shekhinah, which we refer to as, we gave it various names in the first half of this chapter, but the idea is it's the capacity for expression, capacity for creation, the capacity for interaction with that which is as if it were outside of him. That is the Shekhinah. Now, in the case of the human condition, it said that the Shekhinah dwells in the Mishkan HaNefesh dwells in the brain. And from the brain, it extends itself to all the other parts of the body. Where does the Shekhinah dwell? The Shekhinah dwells in the divine brain. What's the divine brain? So we mentioned earlier in this chapter that the divine brain is the wisdom, understanding, and knowledge and will of Hashem. What is the wisdom, understanding, and knowledge of Hashem? The Torah. What is the will of Hashem? The mitzvahs. So Torah and mitzvahs is the divine brain. And from the divine brain, the rays of the Shekhinah extend themselves to all of creation. So all of creation gets its life force and its energy and its creative force from the Torah. This is similar to what our sages tell us. Hashem looked into the Torah. The Torah was the blueprint of the world. Hashem looked into the Torah and created the world in accordance with the Torah. So similar to the minhag there is by Yidden that a chassan, the Shabbos before his chassan, is called to the Torah to have an ufru, because just like Hashem, before he created the world, he looked in the Torah and created the world from the Torah. So the chassan who's about to create his new world is called to the Torah, to look into the Torah, be inspired by the Torah, to create his world in accordance with the blueprint of the Torah. So the Torah is the divine brain, and that's where the Shekhinah itself, which is the essence and the source, the unit from which all divine creative energy and life force emanates, that is in the Torah. And from there, it extends itself into the rest of existence. And we're going to learn exactly how this works. So he begins by saying that the energy that comes down into every creation in accordance with its capacity, that's the detailed energy. But the Shekhinah itself, which is the beginning of all revelation, the ikra and the essence of all revelation. So it's the essence and the source of all that the infinite one, blessed He, shines for the worlds in a way of revelation. This is the source of all drawing down of life force within all the worlds. Because all the life force in all the worlds is only light rays that are extending themselves from the Shekhinah. Like the light that extends itself from the sun. The light that extends itself from the sun is not the sun itself. It's the light emanating from the sun. The sun itself is the source of all light. So the Shekhinah itself, which is the source of all the energy, the source of all of all these manifestations, is so intense that it would be impossible for the worlds to tolerate and to absorb the light of its Shekhinah, that it should enclose itself and should dwell and enclose itself within them, just like the Mishkan HaNefesh is too intense for the eyes or the ears or the toes or the hands or the liver or the heart to be able to handle. It can only dwell in the brain, and from the brain it's extended in a very contracted manner into all the different limbs. Similarly, the Shekhinah itself is too intense to dwell in any specific world or any specific creation. Unless there is some kind of a garment which can conceal the light of the Shekhinah from the creation, that it should be able to enclose itself in the creations through this garment, so it could be there and yet not overwhelm them. So to prevent them from becoming totally nullified in their source. Just like the light of the sun is totally nullified within its source in the body of the sun. In other words, we discussed this a number of times. We have the light of the sun as it emanates from the sun. We say every Shabbos morning, we discuss in the bracha of Yetzer HaMa'oros, talk about the great luminaries that are. So we say in Kel Adon, we say Meleim Ziv, that the luminaries, the sun and the moon, they're filled with shine. They express illumination. What's the difference between the way they're filled with light and the way they express light? So when we talk about the light of the sun exists at two levels. It exists the way it extends itself from the sun into the entire atmosphere. And you can work out that if the sun is so powerful and so luminescent that it can illuminate the entire atmosphere, then it can surely illuminate within itself. So the sun itself must be filled with light. So besides the fact that it's mitfikim light, that expresses light, it's also milayim zi. It's also filled with shine. Now, what would that mean? If I opened up the sun, would I find light inside the sun? The sun is the source of light. The sun is the capacity for illumination. So when we talk about the light that exists within the sun, it's not yet in developed form of light. It's the capacity. In other words, it's the sun's capacity for giving light. So there isn't anything other than the sun in the sun. The light as it exists in the sun is only the sun's capacity for light. I'll give you another example, maybe it's a little closer to home. Let's say somebody gives a bang on the table. The energy with which you bang on the table is coming from your muscle. The muscle is filled with energy, And in every action that a person does, they're expressing the energy from their muscle. So that the muscle is tight with energy, and every expression of your arm, let's say, is an expression of that energy. So if I was to open up the muscle, would I find a lot of energy in it? Of course not. You'd open up a muscle, you'd find the muscle. What is the definition of energy within the muscle? The capacity for expressing energy. So when something exists within its source, it's completely nullified to the source, absorbed within the source, and therefore its definition is the source. So when it emanates from the source, then it becomes light, it becomes energy. But when it exists within the source, it is the source. So the light of the sun, as it exists within the sun, is just the sun. So if the Shekhinah would be manifest in every creation, then the godly light and energy that exists within the creation would not be something that gives it life and gives it existence and gives it awareness. It would overwhelm it, like the light of the sun within the sun is completely overwhelmed by the presence of the sun. So how can the Shekhinah be present in any creation? It would have to be concealed by some kind of a garment that would conceal it so that it could be present and yet not overwhelmed. So what type of a garment would be suitable to do this job? So we have a problem. Why? Because the only garment that can handle the intensity of the Shekhinah is something that is at the same level of the Shekhinah. If it's the same level as the Shekhinah, then it would also overwhelm the recipient. So he says, what is the garment? Okay, let's first finish the words over here. In order that they should not be nullified, legamri b'mkeidan in their source, in the sun itself, this light is not visible. You just see the sun itself. So we don't want that to happen, that the creation be totally overwhelmed by the presence of the Shekhinah to the point where they no longer exist as independent existence. So therefore, the Shekhinah, in order to be present anywhere, has to be enveloped in some kind of a garment that will conceal it. What kind of a garment would be suitable to conceal the Shekhinah and enclose the Shekhinah without it itself becoming nullified by the presence of the Shekhinah? The answer is, it's the will and the wisdom of Hashem that which are enclosed in Torah mitzvahs. The Torah as it's revealed to us and to our children. And why is the Torah a suitable garment? Because the Torah extends itself from the wisdom of Hashem. That is the supernal wisdom of Hashem, which is much higher than the world of revelation, which is the Shin. In other words, in the world of Atzilus, which is the world of godliness, you have 10 spheres. The lowest of the 10 spheres is Malchus. Malchus kingship. In other words, the first 9 spheres are Hashem's existence as if it were within himself. And Malchus is his kingship, his relationship with the world. And that is the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is the source of all divine revelation into the Torah is the wisdom of Hashem. Chachma, the first of the 10 spheres. So the Torah is so much loftier than the Shekhinah. So the Torah is not going to be overwhelmed by the Shekhinah. But then we have the other problem. If the Torah is so much loftier than the Shekhinah, what have you achieved by concealing the Shekhinah within the Torah? Because just like the Shekhinah will overwhelm any existence, the Torah will also overwhelm any existence. It's even higher. It's even greater. So he explains. So the wisdom of Hashem is the Torah comes from Chachmei Law, the supernal wisdom, the Le'ela Me'alma Dizgali, which is so much higher than the world of revelation, which is not. Even in a human being, wisdom is higher than expression, than revelation. But in the divine case, we have to bear in mind also that He and His wisdom are one. So Hashem is wise, but not with the kind of wisdom that we can relate to. Commissioner's Bar La'il has been explained in previous chapters. That the infinite light of Hashem is enclosed and united with the supernal wisdom. And He and His wisdom are one. So how then does the Torah function as a concealment that can enable the Shekhinah to be present in the world? So it's actually Yarda b'Seisen HaMadregas, but at the same time, Torah has descended through mysterious levels, Madrega la Madrega, from level to level, the chain of words, until it enclosed itself in physical things, with the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. We talked about this many times, that the word tzimtzum has two meanings. The word tzimtzum, contraction, can mean something is watered down, it's diminished. So the intensity of godliness and atzilus is very intense. It comes down to bria, it's diminished, it's watered down. It comes down to yitzira, it's further diminished. It comes down to asiya, it's extremely diminished. Right? Then you have the concept of tzimtzum used in another context. We say that in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, the Almighty contracted His Shekhinah between the two poles of the Aron. Tzimtzem Shechinasei bein shnei badei Aron. So what does that mean? Does it mean that it's a watered down, diminished presence? If it's a watered down, diminished presence, that's nothing special about the Kodesh HaKadoshim. A watered down, diminished presence of Hashem you have everywhere. Tzimtzem Shechinasei bein shnei badei Aron means that Hashem concentrates the entire intensity of His Shekhinah between the two poles of the Aron. It's like concentrating something. Concentrating doesn't mean diminishing or watering down. It means squeezing it in, taking a big thing and squeezing it into a little place. So when we say tzimtzum shechinasei bein shnei badei Aron, we mean that the entire Shekhinah in its immense greatness is concentrated into the space of between the two poles of the Aron. Similarly, we learned in Tanya chapter 4 that the Almighty contracted His wisdom and His will into the Torah and mitzvahs as we know. So when I study and open up a Mishnah and I study Shnayim Eichsen B'Talis, two people are holding a garment. This one says I found it. This one says I found it. Right? This is the wisdom of Hashem. Now the wisdom of Hashem is Chachma D'Atzilus, which is one with Hashem Himself. How did it get into Shnayim Eichsen B'Talis? How did it get into a physical equation? The answer is, the Almighty is infinite. And because He's infinite, He has the capacity for infinitely contracting Himself. So He can take His infinite wisdom, which is one with Himself, and He can squeeze it in to a halacha in the Torah that deals with a physical matter. He can squeeze it into a mitzvah. His infinite will is squeezed into the act of a mitzvah, which is a finite physical act. That when I do this mitzvah, in this mitzvah is contained the infinite will of Hashem. So Torah is you have your cake and you eat it too. On one hand, Torah is the wisdom of Hashem, which is one with Hashem Himself. At the same time, Torah has the capacity to lower itself through the chain of worlds in a manner that it retains its infinity and nevertheless is able to be contained within a finite logical equation in Torah and within a finite act in a mitzvah. So Torah has the best of both worlds. On one hand, it's so much higher even than the Shekhinah, because it's from Chachma, which is the highest Sfira, and the Shekhinah is Malchus, with the lowest Sfira. And at the same time, Torah is capable of interacting with any object in the world, because Torah comes down to the lowest dimension. So therefore, Torah is the excellent garment that can envelop and contain the Shekhinah. So just like in the Nefesh, the Mishkan HaNefesh, which is the source of all revelation of the soul, source of all life and energy of the soul, is contained within the brain. The brain is the perfect container to contain the Mishkan HaNefesh, and from there it extends itself into all the other organs and limbs of the body. Similarly, Torah is the divine brain, and that's the perfect residence for the Shekhinah. So the Shekhinah encloses itself and becomes contained and concealed within the Torah, which is the wisdom of Hashem, the brain, the divine brain, as it were. And from there, it emanates into all the rest of creation. That's the gist of it for now. And Yitz Hashem, we're going to go through the individual dynamics of it as we go through. Okay. Sometimes you let me know what the point is, how close to take.